background of Elijah. He's a super grace believer. He's from Tishbe, which is in Gilead, and most likely a Reubenite. He was nomadic. We get actually in this coming historical account, we will see the tall and hairy part again, as well as the girdle. Okay, he was unusual and he was mature. He is extremely stealthy. We've seen him show up multiple times, just all of a sudden appear out of almost nowhere. And we're going to see him do that again as we go through the rest of this account associated with Ahab. And then in point 3, I gave just an overview of what we were going to get in the rest of the study. We're going to see several points, several incidents. We see the drought and the woman in Sidon. We saw that and went through that. That, of course, was what brought us to this study. It was that incident that was recounted in James chapter 5 that brought us into this study. We don't want to lose sight of that. We see the incident with the priests of Baal, where he used to have that picture of the fire coming down from heaven and destroying the sacrifices. Then we saw him go into the cosmic system, go into fear, and he ran in fear from Jezebel, as if Jezebel was somehow more powerful than God himself. Okay, and so we see him malfunctioning, and as a result of that malfunction, we see that in essence he resigned. God asked him a question, gave him a chance to answer, and then performed some miracles and asked him the question again, and he answered exactly the same way, indicating that he hadn't learned anything. It wasn't until after God said, okay, you're basically done, I'm going to have you go find your replacement, that he suddenly woke up and realized what he had done, and he started functioning properly again. And so he went and found Elisha. And that's where we were for the last 2 weeks. We saw him finding Elisha, and we saw the historical account associated with Elisha, and we also saw the lessons from that. And we see that Elisha is a fantastic grace believer as well. When he was singled out and given recognition that he was a prophet, he immediately gave up. He gave up all of the riches that he had, coming from a very wealthy family. And he went ahead, and in order to indicate his complete submission to God and God's plan, he took and sacrificed the animals that he was using to actually do the plowing. And he not only sacrificed the animals, but he did everything. He sacrificed the animals, and he burned the wooden harnesses that they were in. When we think of harnesses, sometimes we don't see oxen around here very often. In fact, in my life, other than on TV, have never seen oxen being pulling anything. And so you tend to think, when you hear the word in English, when you hear the word harness, you tend to think of a harness that's made out of leather and something like that. You go, wow, that would be kind of why would they burn the leather? It was actually a wooden harness that these oxen were yoked in, and so it was the wooden harness that they actually burned, as the firewood for the sacrifice. And so we see Elisha going off with Elijah. Okay, and so Elijah's taken him away, and he's going to do what? He's going to teach him. That's what we learned last week. Some of the lessons that we learned is a leader's responsibility is to bring up other leaders, and particularly a communicator, is to recognize another communicator and help mentor and bring him up. One of the jobs of a pastor is to recognize the other young men in his congregation that have the gift of pastor teacher, and to help bring them up as they recognize that gift and move forward. Okay, and that's what Elijah is doing. He is taking Elisha and he's taking him out and teaching him. And so that's actually where we finished last week. And so this week we're going to get into the next incident, which is the murder of Naboth. And we're going to see the incident surrounding that, of course, the historical event, and then we'll see the lessons that we can learn from that. And then potentially today we'll get into Ahaziah, and what I call the toasted army. And it's really the toasted armies, and we'll see the accounts associated with that. And then we have the message to the southern kingdom. He did actually communicate to the southern kingdom. Elijah did. Although he was a prophet specifically to the northern kingdom, he did have some influence, and he did speak to the southern kingdom. And then we see his transformation, the fact that he did not die physically. He was actually transformed and taken to heaven. That's where they came up with this bizarre theory of the ancient astronauts, right? I don't know if you ever remember that from the 70s and 80s, that somehow there were aliens, and that Elijah was an alien, and he went back into a spaceship and off he went. Okay, I won't be teaching that. We're gonna go directly from what the Bible says. Okay, and then we will see the references to him and the actions associated with him in the New Testament. So that was the actual outline. And then we have in point 4, we went through the incident and the lessons we learned from the drought and the priests of Baal. We also went through the historical account and the lessons that we learned from him and his arrogance and reversionism. And then, like I said, last week and the week before, we spent some time going into finding Elisha, both the historical account and the lesson. So we finished that up last week, and that was with point 7. And we're ready now to go into point 8. And point 8 is going to be the murder of Naboth and the curse of Ahab. So point 8, the murder of Naboth and the curse of Ahab. Because last week you should have finished with subpoint 10, I think. 10 or 11, depending on how you took your notes. I gave you the opportunity to not have to take one of the subpoints. So point 8, the murder of Naboth and the curse on Ahab. It's the curse on Ahab, sorry, not of Ahab, on Ahab. Subpoint A, like we've been doing throughout this entire thing, subpoint A, the historical account, colon. Subpoint 1, this is the one with single parents around it. After the account with Elisha, we don't hear about Elijah for a period of about 6 years. Period. During that time, however, we do get an account of what Ahab is up to. He is warring. He is warring with the king of Aram. That's A-R-A-M, comma, which is the heart of modern day Syria, period. You know, whenever we read these, one of the things that I always chuckle with is the fact that we have such foolish leaders nowadays, you know, but whether they're Democrats or Republicans, it doesn't matter. Okay, the Republicans think that they're going to get rid of war by having a very strong defense and supporting our allies. Okay, and it's good to have a strong defense and support our allies, but the reason for that is for protection of our own borders, not necessarily to end war, right? And then you get these liberal Democrats, okay, that think that they're going to somehow do away with war and have peace throughout the earth. You know, and we had one president when I was younger who decided that, you know, the best way to do that was to try and disarm everybody, and you had the SALT talks and all of that kind of stuff. You know, if all the weapons were gone, then everybody would play nice, right? You know, and that doesn't work because there's always some kind of weapon that someone's going to find, right? You know, I remember when my kids one time were on the playground and they were very small, and my son was being picked on. He was the youngest in this group of kids that were on the playground. He was being picked on by a bunch of other kids, right? And at that time, he and his sister still got along. His older sister picked up a rock and threw it at one of the kids. They didn't have any weapons, you know, but that just shows you, you know, if a 3-year-old can figure out or a 4-year-old can figure out that, gee, this rock's going to work real well, you know, it doesn't take long to figure out that doing away with weapons is not going to do the job, okay? And nowadays, what it is if we in America would just be nicer, the whole world would be better, because, of course, the world's conflicts are all our fault. If we weren't so powerful, if we weren't so Christian, if we weren't so whatever, right, you know, then the life would be good. If we would just embrace Muslim acts that are evil. Well, they're not evil, and they're not terrorism, and they're not. I'm trying to figure out what vocabulary word is used today. But anyway, the idea being that these wars have been going on, okay, since we had, since we had Esau, and these wars are going to continue to go on. We have been told you will have wars and rumors of war forever, okay, until we actually have the millennium. And then, of course, after that, so anyway, the idea is that we have here king of Aram, which of course is the modern day Syria, heart of modern day Syria. Okay, so it has been going on over there, and it's going to go on over there. Okay, continue the point. The king of Aram, comma, Ben-Hadad, comma, have his name up there. And Ben, we say Ben means son, of course, so it's son of Hadad. Sort of like the Vikings in their name, Leif Erikson, he was the son of Eric. Anyway, Ben-Hadad, comma, tries to extort Ahab, into coming under his control and turning over the riches and people of Israel. Period. Ahab, in fear, almost does it. Period. However, comma, his advisors and elders who are at least partially functioning in God's plan convince him not to do so. There's a point here that I don't get into actually when I do the lessons, but there's a point here that there are individuals, okay, who say, gee, if I could only see a miracle, I'd be such a stronger believer, right? If I could just see God do something like that, right? Ahab and all of these leaders, okay, saw when Elijah called down fire, and not only, we saw not only did the sacrifice get burned up, but all the water, all the stones, everything, right? That's a pretty good miracle. And yet here's Ahab, just a short time later, afraid of Ben-Hadad, when instead he has a God on his side, okay, that can do something like that and more, right? And here he is afraid. And the elders have to calm him down, okay? So they're functioning at least partially. They haven't been sucked into the entire Baal evil, okay? And so some of them say, no, don't do this. We've got God on our side. So continue the point. And a prophet comes forward. This is not Elijah. But a prophet comes forward and tells him, that's Ahab, that he will actually prevail in the war against Ben-Hadad. The prophet ends his statement with the phrase we would expect, comma, which justifies why Ahab will succeed, comma, which is, quote, and you will know that I am the Lord, period, end quote. In the battle, comma, the Israelites are successful, but Ben-Hadad escapes and runs away, period. He begins to gather another army. And plans the strategy for another attack. While Ahab also begins to prepare, period. Then Ben-Hadad attacks again, period. But once again, okay, sorry. I can read it this fast. But once again, a prophet foretells of victory. And Israel wins the battle. This time, however, the king of Aram does not run away. Instead, he is surrounded. He gives himself up. And promises to return the lands and restore everything that his fathers had stolen from Ahab's fathers. So Ahab makes a contract or covenant with him and lets him go. But he wasn't supposed to do that. God had turned Ben-Hadad over to Ahab for Ahab to kill. So another prophet. Does a tricky thing. To make Ahab accuse himself. And to declare his own punishment. And as a result, the prophecy is that God promises Ahab he will die early, and his people will be destroyed. First Kings 20. So while that was a little bit long, subpoint 1, it was the entire 20th chapter of First Kings. Okay, in a nutshell. And it was really interesting what the prophet does at the end there. What the prophet does is the prophet actually goes up to another man and he says, "Hit me." Okay, and the other man refuses to hit him, right? And so the prophet says, basically, since you refuse to hit me, you're going to walk away and you're going to die. And sure enough, the guy walks away and whap, he dies, okay? So he comes up to another guy and he goes, "Hit me." And the other guy, probably looking at the dead one, said, "Okay," and hauls off and wails him. You know? and so the prophet did this so that he would be all bruised and everything, right? You know, so then he's all bruised and he bandages himself up, and he waits for King Ahab to come by. And when King Ahab comes by, he pretends to be one of the soldiers that had been just in the war, and he basically says, "I was in the war, and we captured one of the bad guys, okay, and it was my job to watch the bad guy and make sure that he didn't escape, okay." And while I was off doing other stuff, and I let him befriend me, and I let him go, okay. And they told me that if I let him escape, that I was going to die, but I let him go. What do you think should happen? And the king said, "Well, the punishment should be that you die. You let this guy go." And then the prophet takes off his bandages and says, "Aha!" Ahab recognizes him as a prophet, and he goes, "Yeah, just exactly what I did is exactly what you did. God gave you Ben-Hadad, and you let him go. Okay, so therefore your punishment is going to be that you're going to die. Okay, and so your people are going to be destroyed as well." Okay, so it's kind of what you would see in a movie, where the guys are trying to play a trick, "Hit me," right? And that's exactly what happens. So he gets Ahab to actually accuse himself, and Ahab, after he said this, right, of course, and the prophet is revealed. You can imagine that he just kind of went, "Uh-oh," "I shouldn't have said that," right? He's talking about me, and sure enough, he was talking about him. So that's what the prophecy is. So we're going to pick up with subpoint 2, and what's going to happen is Ahab is walking away, okay, and now he's all upset, okay, and he's feeling sorry for himself because he's just been told, okay, by a prophet that his outcome is not going to be good. And previews of coming attractions, one of the things we're going to learn as we go through some of the lessons from here is the fact that when you see Ahab, what do you see? You see a person who is entirely in emotional revolt. The guy can't keep his emotions in check at all, right? He allows Jezebel to run herd over him, okay, and tell him what to do. So he's henpecked, okay, and then he's constantly turning around and feeling sorry for himself, right? And so sure enough, when we get to 1 Kings chapter 21, that's exactly what's going to happen. So subpoint 2. Subpoint 2. We then pick up the account of Elijah. So all during that war, we didn't see Elijah, okay? We then pick up the account of Elijah in 1 Kings 21. in this account, he will once again be sent by God to pronounce judgments on Ahab and Jezebel, semicolon. In this case, comma, for the murder of an innocent citizen of Jezreel, that's Jezreel, that's where Jezebel and Ahab live. In this case, for the murder of an innocent citizen of Jezreel named Naboth, comma, I know it's a run-on sentence. Okay, named Naboth, comma, who happened to live next door to the palace, period. I don't think I'd ever want to live next door to the palace. You know, you think about what happened to Bathsheba's husband, right? You know, because they lived next door to the palace and David saw her, you know, and now you got Naboth who's living next door to the palace and it's not so good for him, okay? Having to live next door to the palace. In this account, which is 1 Kings 21, verses 1 through 16, 1 Kings 21, 1 through 16. In this account, Ahab who is suffering in self-pity because of the pronouncement concerning Ben-Hadad, comma, decides that he would like to do a little gardening. So decides that he would like to do a little gardening to take his mind off his troubles, period. He decides he wants his garden to be on the land that is currently Naboth's vineyard. We're going to see a little bit of Veruca Saltz, who was the one that was the bad egg in Willy Wonka. Anyway, continue the point. Ahab offered to relocate Naboth. So Ahab offered to relocate Naboth and or pay him the going price for the land. But Naboth won't sell it. Well, that sounds kind of, that sounds kind of picky on Naboth, right? Well, it's not. What you have to understand is you have to understand that God gave these individuals the promised land. God gave these families, gave the different tribes particular land, okay? And it was a gift from God, and they were not supposed to just treat it as if it were just land, just something that they could willy-nilly get rid of. And in particular, okay, here's an evil king. Naboth, we understand, or we can surmise, is a properly functioning individual, okay? And he's not about to give up what God gave him, okay, to someone who is malfunctioning, king or otherwise, okay? It's just not going to happen. So Naboth won't sell it. Continue the point. He understands. This is Naboth. He understands that he is not to sell the land that God gave his fathers and that was his birthright, semicolon. In fact, comma, he tells Ahab that the Lord had forbidden him to sell it. See, to a farmer or a vintner or anyone else, the land is a very precious thing, and it's extremely precious when it's been given to you by God, and it's been in the family and passed down, and it's your birthright, okay? And you're going to give it to your sons, who'll give it to their sons, okay? And then on top of that, God says, no, don't do it. That's a pretty shut case, okay? When I was reading this, I was reminded years ago when I was working at Motorola, one of the individuals that I was working at was part of the Power family, okay? The Power family of Power Road, Power Ranch, Power everything, okay? That's down in Gilbert and Chandler area, okay? And he was a very, very humble guy to talk to, okay? And we got along very well. And he grew up, obviously, as you would expect, he grew up in Gilbert, okay? And so he was getting, he used to always get his hair cut at this little barber shop that used to be on the main street in Gilbert before they went and rearranged it, okay? And here you have to understand, his family came out to Arizona when it was a territory, okay? And they had to go through some of the things that happened out in Arizona, which you don't hear about a lot in the history, but there were water wars, just like there were in other territories, right? And there were Mormons and the Powers are Catholic, okay? And so they had great wars associated with the land for religious reasons. The Mormons had come here in Nehi, and they were trying to take over the entire valley, and Nehi is right by the river, so they were trying to control the water, and on and on. So Lehi, not Nehi, excuse me, Lehi. Nehi is the grape juice, the soda. Lehi, anyway, in Lehi. Okay, and so anyway, so he was recounting his family history, right? And he was talking about one day when he was at the barbershop, he was getting his hair cut, and there was another individual at the barbershop that didn't know who he was, right? And was in this individual that I worked with, his name was Larry. Larry's uncle had just passed away. Okay, and he had passed away, even though they were wealthy and blah, 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 and had all this land and everything. His uncle had passed away at the age of 90 out cleaning out a canal. Okay, he himself had been out there with a shovel cleaning out a canal, right? And so this guy at the barbershop, not knowing that Larry was a Power, the guy at the barbershop's talking to the barber. He goes, man, I can't believe that old man Power died like that. As wealthy as he was, it seems like he ought to be able to have someone do that for him, And he goes, the best crop those people ever planted out there were the houses that are out there now. I mean, it made him rich. And Larry just looked at the guy and said, you just don't get it. All we ever wanted to do was farm. That's what we were. We were farmers. My uncle was a farmer. My father was a farmer. My grandfather and his father, we were farmers. That's what we did. The economy made it so that we couldn't farm. We couldn't keep our property. We had to sell it. We didn't want those houses. We wanted the land, right? And that's what I thought of when I'm sitting here thinking about Naboth and his father and his father's fathers, okay, had received this land from God. And now here comes this king, this upstart king saying, well, give it to me so that I can have a garden because I'm feeling sorry for myself. Okay. you can imagine the indignity or the not indignity, but the ire that Naboth had, okay? Continue the point. So now Ahab is in the dumps again. Instead of understanding that the Lord has reasons for this, he goes home and arrogantly pouts. See, it might have been one thing if Naboth had said, no, I'm not going to sell you the land, but he emphasized it by saying, no, I'm not going to sell you the land because God forbids it. At that point, okay, again, an individual who's perhaps just out of a fellowship, okay, not deep in reversionism like we're starting to see is happening with Ahab here, okay, he would go, oh, wow, God says no. There must be a reason God said no. I'm going to accept a negative answer. I'm going to turn around and I'm not going to pursue it. But he doesn't. He's arrogant. He goes home and he pouts, okay? And it's funny that, mankind doesn't change. When we read this story and it takes place so long ago, okay, we're talking about almost 700 years BC, okay? And so that's, 3,000 and some odd, 3,000 years ago almost, okay? Ahab is presented exactly like a pouting kid. What does he do? He goes into his bedroom, okay? He lays down, turns his back and his face, he goes back out and his face to the wall and he doesn't eat. I'm not going to eat. Poor, pitiful me. I can't have what I want, right? I'm just going to go pout, okay? Continue the point. Of course, the evil Jezebel notices his mood and asks him what's wrong. See, we're going to get to see who wears the pants in the family. Like they say, behind every good man is a good woman. Well, I guess the opposite. Behind every really rotten man is a really rotten woman. No, they're both rotten. But the idea is he's in emotional revolt. He's going to let her take him by whatever and have him, do her will. Ask him what's wrong. So continue the point. After he tells her, she chastises him and reminds him that he is king, semicolon. He can do what he wants, period. You want the property, you take the property. Anyway, he can do what he wants. Continue the point. So she takes matters, not he. She takes matters into her own hands. Literally. She takes matters into her own hands and sends out messages in the name of her husband that the elders of the town should proclaim a fast and make Naboth the honored guest. It was interesting that it was a fast and not a feast. Okay, but it's a fast. Okay, like a holy day where they're going to fast. Okay, and he's going to be the honored guest. Once they do that, comma, they're to bring forward 2 false witnesses who will say that Naboth cursed both God and the king, period. See, now what's really interesting when you read this and you read it through, the idea is that, okay, first of all, they're bringing out false witnesses, but the idea is that it should have been good enough, okay, that the false witnesses accuse him of cursing God. Okay, that was enough to be stoned. But you can see when you see these things, when you read it and you see the subtleties, okay, you can see that these people are so, okay, reversionistic at this point in time. The people of the city, particularly with a queen like Jezebel, right, and in a lackluster, spineless king like Ahab, okay, these people are so reversionistic that you could see that if they said, this man cursed God, they'd go like, yeah, okay. Right? So they had to say God and the king. Oh, yeah, I can't have him cursing our king. You know, but it should have been enough to say he cursed God if it were true, but they have to add God and the king. That's something you don't necessarily pick up on when you're reading it. It's like, okay, I get it, but the idea is no, half of these people are already worshiping Baal, right? So cursing God is no big deal. But you curse God and the king, and now it's a big deal, right? So continue the point. This indicates just how much the elders had fallen into Satan's cosmic system. The fact that Jezebel could count on them to lie, and provide false witness, without a single individual the fact that she could count on them to lie and provide false witness without a single individual standing up to refute it, indicates that the majority of the elders were in Satan's system. Because he was found, quote, guilty, end quote, Naboth was taken out and stoned. Doesn't mean they moved him to Colorado. It means that they executed him. Okay. And we saw this in James. We saw the fact that James was admonishing, tying this back into James. We saw that James was admonishing the individual, telling them that they were murderers. Remember that? And what he was saying was, it was indicating that when you get so far down, you will actually get to the point where you will do what you think is unthinkable. Right? When you're functioning properly, you would never think that you would go out and murder somebody. But here they've gotten so far down into the cosmic system that they're turning around and they're treating murder as if it's no big deal. They've gotten accomplices put into it, and they're, and all they're doing is, using the power that they have to go ahead and actually murder someone and get away with it. Okay, so Naboth is taken out and stoned. We'll have a couple more sentences in this point. When word reached Jezebel that this had been done, she told her husband to get up and go take the land that Naboth refused to sell because he was now dead. Now see the subtlety here that we're supposed to pick up on, or you should pick up on, is the fact that since they had to find out that this happened, that would indicate what? That obviously indicates that they were not part of the fast. They were not there. She had these elders do it, come up with this accusation and everything, and did what? Did like a lot of rich people do when they want to hire a hit. They made sure that there was nothing that tied back to them, right? Jezebel was shrewd. Okay, she had these people do it. And if it backfired, I didn't know they were doing it. I wasn't there. I didn't see it. That's up to them, right? But when they did do it, okay, then word got back to them, and she told her cowardly husband, get up and go take that land. I've taken care of it for you, honey. Okay. Yes, dear. Yeah, maybe I'll go garden and stay out of there and stay there and stay away from you for a while. But anyway, he goes and he gets it. Now, how can they do that? Well, I'm going to give you a sentence here. So continuing the point, the law is such that the property of an accused criminal becomes at once the property of the king. See, so like when David had Bathsheba's husband killed, okay, he was killed in battle. He was not a criminal. So David couldn't go over and take the house and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, I'm sure he got it, but the idea was he couldn't immediately go over and take it. Here, again, Jezebel, you see how shrewd she is. She doesn't just have the guy, whacked one day when he's out in his vineyard, and someone comes across and finds him dead. Okay, because then you got all that sticky situation of having to go through the legal system, someone similar to probate, to figure out what to do with this property. Doesn't automatically go to the king. But if this guy is found out to be a criminal, particularly a capital criminal, and is executed, then it becomes his. I mean, this woman is utter evil. Okay, now okay, when someone calls a woman a Jezebel, okay, and you see that a lot in older movies. It isn't one of the things people use today because people aren't that intelligent. Okay, they don't study the Bible as much anymore. They don't understand the analogies. I mean, even back in the day, when I say back in the day, back in the 30s and 40s, and when you see some of the 40s movies, right, even unbelievers understood the Bible. Okay, and the accounts of the individuals in the Bible. And so when someone used the word Jezebel, that was really, really bad. That was worse than any kind of language that you could use today. Now we're just so gross we end up calling someone a body part or something like that, right? Now we don't even think. But this was an evil woman, and you need to understand that, okay? And she's going to get her just rewards. We'll get there, okay? Anyway, executed criminal becomes at once property of the king. 2 more sentences. So Ahab arose and went to take the land, period. This is where we once again see Elijah coming onto the scene, period. Dun, dun, dun. Okay, so that's actually where we're going to, that's the cliffhanger. That's where we're going to end this first class. Remember, today is the day where we're going to have the congregational meeting. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do true spiritual giving. We'll close with a song and a prayer. We'll go ahead and take, let's say, 10 minutes or so to allow you to refresh your coffee and get some coffee and give me time to change the computer over here a little bit and get Chris's reports up. And then we'll come back. We'll have our congregational meeting. And after the congregational meeting, we'll give you a chance to stand up and stretch a little bit more, and then we'll come back again, and we will finish the second class. Okay? But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and do, as we always do, true spiritual giving. And the reason, of course, that we do it is because we are commanded in 1 Corinthians 16:2. It says, on the first day of every week, let each one of you, according to his own judgment, be putting aside and saving, according to how he might be prospering. Of course, that is what God has provided above and beyond what the believer actually needs to function. That's the prosperity that we are talking about. Okay? Let each one of you, according to his own judgment, be putting aside and saving, according to how he might be prospering. And then in the dictate and principle of true spiritual giving is found in 2 Corinthians 9:7. Verse 7 says, each one should give just as he himself has decided what is the right amount in his heart, slant right lobe. It means you're supposed to use your doctrinal information that you have in order to decide how much to give. And it says, not out from sorrow, slant pain, slant distress, slant reluctance, and this is related to the personal loss of funds, nor out from compulsion, slant pressure. So you're not supposed to be forced into giving. Nobody should try and bend your arm and make sure that you give. We don't have little envelopes with your name on it that go out in the mail, okay? Out from compulsion, slant pressure, for you see, the God keeps on loving a cheerful, satisfied giver. And then we have a dictate plus a promise of blessing related to true spiritual giving found in the Old Testament. This is in Proverbs 3:9 and 10. It says, honor the Lord from your prosperity. And that means manifesting your cognizance and appreciation of all of your prosperity by exhaling back a portion of what God has given to you in the plan of God. And it goes on to say, and from the first of all your income. So if you truly understand and appreciate that God is the source of your income as a result of your right job, then you'll think of him at the very beginning. And from the first of all your income, then it goes on to say, and if you do, your storehouses shall be filled with superabundance, and your vats shall overflow with new wine. And the idea here is that by demonstrating capacity for blessing, by properly functioning in true spiritual giving, the believer is actually manifesting capacity for more and greater blessing, and God will fulfill and fill up that additional capacity. The fact that the real issue in true spiritual giving is doctrine resident in the soul, along with a very important warning is given to us in 2 Corinthians 8:12. It says, for if positive volition based upon doctrine is present, this is perfectly acceptable to the degree that he might be having. So that's the wonderful part of it. That tells us the doctrine is important, is the true wealth of God's economy. But then it goes on to say, it is not perfectly acceptable to the degree that he is not having, meaning that if you give what you do not have, then you are destroying the whole concept of this memorial. We understand then that God has the ability to fulfill the believer's capacity for giving. So if you want to give in the temporal area and you don't have the funds, all you have to do is go to God in prayer, and God will answer properly made prayers. He may not answer it in the positive, giving you that money, and he may answer it instead in the negative, leaving you with the same income that you have right now. In which case, in either case, you are thankful for the answer from God, and you know what God's plan for your life is. Okay. And so we have in 2 Corinthians 9:8. Now the God keeps on being manifestly able to richly provide all grace to, slant for you, slant you all, in order that while always having complete self-sufficiency in everything, meaning that you have everything necessary to do your job in the plan of God. You, Slant You All, might be providing richly to Slant for every divine good work, Slant production. So if it's God's desire to provide blessing to enable the believer to fulfill his capacity for giving, God has all of the power in the universe to do so. So we're going to go now and take our few moments of silence designed to be able to give the believer priest both the opportunity to manifest properly his attitude towards doctrine and exhale back to God a portion of what he's received from him. And also, if your decision is to exhale in the temporal area, we'll give you that opportunity as well. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that in this memorial of true spiritual giving, we're given the opportunity to understand the prosperity, to understand where the prosperity comes from, both temporally, but also most importantly, spiritually, to understand that we have prosperity associated with your grace, with the fact that you provided for us salvation, and in turn of salvation, on top of salvation, you gave us everything necessary to function properly once we were saved. You gave us a plan, each plan individually crafted for each one of us, such that all we have to do is execute properly using the power that you also provided, and we will have above and beyond blessings both in time and eternity, and that we will have the opportunity for even more and greater prosperity. And for that, we are truly thankful. And we pray in Christ's name, amen. Okay, let's go ahead. We're going to, if you'll stand, we're going to close with a song.